So in a recent video, I took a bank of £300 and turned it into £1,300. I made £1,000 over a relatively short period of time. And necessarily there were a few questions around how that was achieved. I answered quite a lot of detail in that particular video, but necessarily that prompted a load more questions about specifics on how I managed to grow the bank and the way that I did that, and more importantly, what were the key and important things that I would give for somebody attempting to do the same thing. So I thought I'd answer them in this video. If you're interested in trading with BetAngel, then visit our website where you can download a free trial of BetAngel Professional and BetAngel Trader. If you want to learn how to use them, then visit the Academy where we give you a detailed, structured walkthrough of each product. And if you're an existing user, then head on over to the forum where we have a load of files for you to download to customize and use within BetAngel. So I will start on a point that I have raised before, but it's important to reinforce it and give you some stats that I didn't mention in the other video about my approach to those markets and the way that I actively traded it. But one of the things I've said for many years is that for every strategy there is a market, and every market there is a strategy. Your role as a trader is to match those two things together. So when you approach a market, you have to fit the strategy to it, something that will be effective and give you a fair chance of a profit. So when I moved that bank from £300 to £1,300, I actually only traded about 2/3 of the markets available to me. And that was because I was being sort of reasonably risk averse. I was avoiding stuff that I felt was marginal, that I didn't have to trade. But as a consequence, you know, I did have a reasonable strike rate, and it was relatively straightforward to do. And when we look at how you should do this, I suggest keep a trading log, monitor what you're trading, markets that worked, ones that didn't work, and gradually you'll see a pattern develop, which will allow you to strike out where you tend to make the most errors. And that by default will move you up a level almost immediately. So I did touch on this in the previous video, but having adequate liquidity in the market will reduce the amount of risk that you've got. So there are some markets that will not produce adequate liquidity. And the reason that we want liquidity is so that we can open a trade and close it fairly quickly. Or if the position starts to go against us, we can like dump the position and get out of it really quickly. So whether it's, you know, turning a profit quickly or getting out of a position quickly, we need that underlying liquidity within the market. And when we talk about liquidity, what I'm saying here is volume is not liquidity. That number that you see on the Betfair screen, which indicates the amount of money that's been matched in the market, that is volume. But that volume could have arrived over a very long period of time. When we're talking about liquidity, we're talking about the amount that is getting matched per second. That's the important number for you, because when you open a trade, if you open your trade with inside that liquidity, then you'll be able to actively trade successfully, because you can get the trade in and out, or you can close out your position for a loss without having to chase the price around. And that will make a huge difference to your trading over the longer term. So make sure that you trade in highly liquid markets. Active trade management is something that people seem to ignore. I see people make this mistake repeatedly, and generally what you should be doing is you should actually be opening a trade, closing a trade, and then hedging your position. I know that sounds really obvious, but let me explain why it's important that you follow that mechanism very carefully. Because if we open a trade and then close the trade, we could actually repeat that position within the market. Whether we made a profit or a loss, we are very focused on getting a positive trade through the market, trying to do the best that we can. And we may actually repeat that process more than once. So if you're using a stake of £100 and you trade it through the market 10 times, you've effectively traded £1,000. And that will dramatically leverage the amount of money that you can actually get from a market. But you can only do that if you open a trade, close a trade, open a trade, close a trade. And you notice what I'm saying here is I'm not saying hedge. I'm not saying open a trade and then hedge, because the hedging process of the whole trading mechanism on sports is basically hedging just the profit and the loss. But if you open a trade and then try and hedge it, you're trying to close a trade and hedge at the same time, and you could end up in a world of hurt. So it's really important, and that stops you from doing another trade as well, because suddenly it's all messed up. So it's much more important that you open trade, close a trade, decide if you want to do another one, and then the last action that you perform in the market is to actually hedge that position. If you follow that process rigorously, it will dramatically improve your trading. Dealing with losses. I often get a lot of questions and people say to me, oh, can you show a trade where you've lost money? And the problem is I never think that there's really any information contained in it. I have published trades where I've lost money, but the problem is I don't know why they ended up, well, I mean, you sort of do know why they ended up at a loss because you saw it happen, but the reasons behind it were outside of your control. So there's nothing clever that I do in terms of trying to manage losses. Basically, I'll open a position in the hope that it does what I expect, but ultimately when that position goes sour, then I just try and close out the best I can with whatever stake that I've got left. There's no sort of active management of those losses. They're just part of the trading process. So you'll often see me enter the market at what I feel is a critical point, something where it's going to turn or something's going to happen there. But then you'll immediately see me put my orders further up on the ladder. And what I'm doing there is I'm marking where I feel that this price will go. If the price moves there very quickly and looks like it will go further, I can always cancel those orders and push them further up the ladder. But if the price starts to go against me and the trade fails, then I already know where I'm going to get out and where that critical point within the market is, where I know that the trade will have failed. So I always have it at a position far enough away from my entry point where I know that it has definitely failed, because having it any tighter than that will mean that I end up closing out my positions far too quickly and far too early. But I also spread the orders further up the ladder, so that gives me a little bit of breathing space if the trade goes up and then starts to come back down again. It may be that it's sort of on a noisy path upwards to where I expect it will go, and by matching some of those trades, it allows me to hold my position for a little bit longer and make me more tolerant of losses. So one of the important things to think about when you're trading on a ladder and you're looking at a sports market is you've got all of these increments that go up and down the ladder, and we refer to these as tick sizes. But in total there are 351 tick sizes that go from 101 to the highest amount available, which is 1,000. So if we are trading with £100 at odds of 2 and we're going for a 1 tick gain and it moves from 2 to 1.99, we'll only actually ever make £1. And then if we hedge that position, we have to place another bet in the market that dilutes that a little bit more. So trading with £100 at 2 will only actually yield us 50p. That isn't a ginormous amount of money. So my recommendation to you is trade at slightly bigger prices. You're always going to have to keep an eye on the favourites to understand what the favourite's doing and how that influences the trade that you're on. But say, for example, we put £100 at odds of 6 and we trade from 6.2 down to odds of 6. That will yield us 20% on that £100. We will make £20 for a 1 tick gain on odds of 6. And then if we hedge that position, we end up with £3.33 instead of 50p. So you can see we've sort of earned 6 times more by trading a runner maybe 3 down the ladder. But ultimately, all of the ticks move in different increments. They move at 1% at a time, then 2%, then 5, then 10, then 20. So as a consequence, the yield that you get trading at different prices will be completely different. So if you've got a small bank and you want to return a decent trade with relative ease, because it is all relative, then maybe start looking at some of those bigger prices and maybe avoid those favorites at short prices, because the only way you're ever going to get a decent yield out of those is by getting a big move or using a big stake. And necessarily, that's going to be harder for you to do if you're first starting out. So yeah, selecting which runner you're going to look at will significantly improve the yield that you get with your trading. But always remember, all of the ladders are interrelated, so even if you don't trade the favorite, you're still going to have to keep an eye on it. So I've based this video on questions I received on the other video. If there's other things that you're interested in, then let me know, and I'll be able to talk to you specifically about some of those key points. But what we've discussed in this video to help you grow your bank are a number of key elements that I think you absolutely need to do and to focus on top of your trading. And that will be market selection, which will allow, and strategy selection, which will allow you to minimize any losses that can occur and allow you to maximize any of the potential gains that are out there. Understand the difference between volume and liquidity, and only participate in markets that are high liquidity. So it could be that you skip a market completely because the money just isn't there. Understand the trading process properly as well. When you are actively trading, you want to open a trade, close a trade, and hedging is the very, very final thing that you will do. But it's quite possible that you may open and close trades more than once. When you actually enter a position, know what would make a successful trade, but also frame exactly where you know that the trade has gone wrong. If you do that, that will help you achieve a positive expectancy. When you're looking at losses as well, understand that losses are going to occur, and as long as you frame them correctly, then they should be manageable, but make sure that you have a tolerance to that loss. Make sure that you're not taken out of the market by noise itself. If you want to apply structure to your staking, then perhaps use some of the staking mechanisms that we have available within betangel. That's why we've developed them. It allows you to add that structure, and it will alter your stake so that the trade outcome is equal depending upon which runner you're actively trading and at what price. But also think about, if you're starting with a small bank, you may want to trade runners at a slightly larger price, because if you're using a fixed stake, the yield that you'll get on slightly bigger priced selections will be a lot more than if you're trading on a much, much shorter price. And that will give you a little bit more confidence, and it will allow you to grow your bank just that little bit quicker until you feel confident to use large enough stakes or go for a larger move. Anyhow, I hope that video has been useful for you.